Hello everyone, this is Emma from Beanbag Books, and I am sweating like a pig in my tiny room that has no air conditioning, so let's get this over with, shall we? So it is July 31st. As I'm filming this, it probably isn't July 31st when you're watching it, but that means it's probably definitely August, and August is Women in Translation Month. If you didn't know that, then first of all, shame on you. No, I'm kidding. I actually didn't know very much about it before I started becoming interested in translation. So if you didn't know about it, now you do. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the books that I'm planning to read. If any of them look interesting to you, then you should follow along. I'm going to start with the two that I own. The first one is The Hole by Hiroko Oyamada. This is a real skimpy little thing. As you can see, it's only about 90 pages. That would make it the shortest book I have read so far this year. I actually bought this book in Texas when I was visiting family there just a few months ago, and I got it at a blind date with a book thing where they wrap up a book and you don't know exactly what's inside it, but they have a little blurb on the front, and the blurb was like translation and like Alice in Wonderland, and I was like, sign me up. This book, as far as I can tell, is about a woman who moves to another place because of her husband's job, and one day she is following this animal that she sees, and she follows it all the way to this place in the woods, and then she falls into a hole, and it's about like all of the different stuff that she does like inside the hole. So if you liked Coraline, or maybe if you didn't like Coraline and were hoping it would be better, then maybe this book is for you. Oh, also, would like to say that it's translated from Japanese by David Boyd. Thank you, David. I don't know you, but I'm sure that you're pretty cool. I'm also interested in reading Straight from the Horse's Mouth by Maryam Alaoui. Am I saying that right? Why do I have to play this game every time? Why, I gotta learn to look this up in advance. Is there like a video that she's in that's not in French? Oh dear. Here.
Hello, my name is Maryam Alaoui.
Alaoui. Oh, I was actually right. Yes, I was right. Next up is Straight from the Horse's Mouth by Maryam Alaoui. This is a book I saw recommended online, I think either in Asymptote or Words Without Borders, which are two very good magazines about translated literature. It was translated from French by Emma Ramadan. It's about a prostitute in Casablanca, Morocco, who is trying to provide for her daughter, and she ends up being asked to play a part in this artsy sort of film that's someone is making, and about like all of her adventures doing that. I've heard it's very funny. I'm always down for a funny book, especially a funny book in translation. I think that funny translated books deserve much more recognition because it's very difficult to translate humor, as I know. Okay, now we're getting into books I don't own. I'm gonna have to edit this in later. This is why you should just buy all of your books, man. No, I'm kidding. Support your libraries. They're great. Next book I'm interested in reading is called A Castle in the Clouds by Kirsten Gier, I believe, and it's translated by Romy Fursland. This is a young adult novel about a young girl who is working over the summer in the Swiss Alps, and she works for this big kooky hotel that's very old-fashioned, and it has a lot of like crazy guests that are running in and out, and it sounded like a really fun read, which is something that I've been missing, and I've never actually read, I think, a young adult novel in translation, unless you count the Inkheart series, which I don't know, that's not quite young adult. I guess it kind of is. Not since the Inkheart series though, and that's been like 10 years. So I'm very excited to read this as well. Next book I'm interested in reading is Celestial Bodies by Joka Alharti. This was, I think, the first book by a woman from Oman to be translated into English, and it also won the International Booker Prize, and this was only like a couple of years ago, so that's pretty cool. The book looks interesting. It's about three sisters who are all having some difficulties in their romantic lives. There's one, I think, who had a relationship with this guy who's now abroad, and she's hoping he'll come back, and then a couple of others that are looking to get married, and about their lives. And I always like a good book about families and family relationships, and I'm interested to learn a little bit more about Oman as a country because I don't know very much about it. It was translated by Marilyn Booth. Almost forgot. Next up, there's a couple authors that I had heard a little bit about before. I want to read The Chandelier by Clarice Lispector also. I've read one book by her. I read it last year. It was The Hour of the Star. I thought it was kind of interesting. I don't think I fully understood it, to be quite honest. My pea brain could not really handle it, but I thought it was interesting, and so I would like to read more of her books. I'm going to read the translation into English by Magdalena Edwards. I don't think my Portuguese is quite good enough that I could manage to read it in Portuguese just yet. Maybe I'll get there next year. This book looks like it's another book about families and family life. I think I saw it on the blurb, but there was a brother and a sister in their relationship. So I will be interested to see what that holds for me. And finally, we have a book that I had just started, but I've read like 3 pages, so I cannot give you any really relevant information about it, and that is The Story of My Teeth by Valeria Luiselli, translated into English by Christina McSweeney, whose translations of Spanish works I have read before. Valeria Luiselli is someone I've read interviews of, so I know a little bit about her. I've not read any of her books yet. She seems like a person that's had a lot of different experiences in her life, which is neat. So she is Mexican by birth and heritage, but she didn't live in Mexico for most of her life. She moved around with her dad, who was a diplomat, I think, and she went to college in Mexico, but then she went to live in the United States, and so she said a lot of the time that sometimes when she writes in Spanish or speaks in Spanish, she feels a little bit awkward, like maybe she isn't supposed to be there, like her Spanish is kind of old-fashioned because she didn't pick up colloquialisms from living there as a kid the way a lot of people do. She writes in both English and Spanish, and this is a book that was written by her in Spanish but was translated into English, and I could have read it in Spanish, I guess, but I think kind of the point of Women in Translation Month is to shed light on not only the women authors that are being translated, but the translators who are doing the work, and so I thought I should give the translation a try. The book looks really interesting and experimental. Apparently, in order to write the book, Valeria Luiselli actually she based it off of a group of factory workers, I think, and then she sent chapters of the book to them to listen to on tape, and then they gave her feedback about what they thought of the story, and she used that to modify the story, which sounded like a very different approach to fiction. When I review the book, I'll have a little bit more information for you. That's just something that I read in an article, but it sounded really cool. And if I have time, here are 3 books that I would also like to read if I finish that list of 6 before the end of August. Miss Iceland by Oder Ava Olofsdóttir. It was translated by Brian Fitzgibbon. The Door by Magda Szabo, which was translated by Len Ricks. And Last Witnesses by Svetlana Alexievich, which was translated by Richard Prevere and Larissa Volokhonsky. So those are books that I want to read if I have a little bit of extra time this month. I'll let you know if I do. And then one final thing I'm going to be doing, which I've also already started, is I am also going to be reading throughout the month Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey. So given that we don't actually know for sure who wrote the Odyssey, it was probably a group of different people, likely not a blind illiterate man named Homer, as Emily Wilson discusses at length in her introduction. But this is the very first translation of the Odyssey into English by a woman, and not only is that very exciting, I've heard a lot of interesting things about the interpretation that Emily Wilson has of the text and how it's different from the other translators, who were, of course, all men. It's not quite a woman in translation, but there are a lot of women characters in the Odyssey, and the translator is a woman, so I think it counts as at least a side project. That reminds me, I haven't heard a lot of cicadas recently. Poor guys. I wonder what happened to them. Alright guys, that's my TBR for Women in Translation Month. I hope that you all enjoy hearing me talk about these books a little bit later, and if you're inspired to read along, then let me know in the comments and we can maybe talk about it some more. Thank you and goodbye.